morning. It's the midweek edition of Business Morning. Thank you for joining us. I'm Chimeze Obi Iwago. Well, the National Bureau of Statistics has just released the inflation numbers and reports that headline figure declined to 11.14%. That's 0.09% less from 11.23% recorded in June. Now, this represents an 18th consecutive decline in headline inflation year on year. On a month-on-month basis, the headline index came down to 1.13% in July, down by 0.11 percentage points from the rate recorded in June, which was 1.24%. This represents the first time month-on-month headline inflation has declined since February 2018. Well, we'll talk more about these latest figures later on the show. And the Director General of the Debt Management Office, Patience Onyeha, has described the nation's 22 trillion naira debt profile as sustainable. Speaking at a news conference in Abuja, Mrs. Onyeha says Nigeria's public debt profile decreased by 1.4% as at June 2018. She also adds that the decrease is as a result of the 3.3% decline in the federal government's debt stock between March and June 2018.
If you look at between March and June, the total public debt actually dropped by about 1.44%, most of it due to a reduction in the domestic debt of the state. So total public debt between December 2017 and June 2018, like I said, grew by a little over 3%, 3.01% to be precise. And highlights of it are the federal government's domestic debt actually dropped from 12.59 trillion to 12.151 trillion. For some of you who have been tracking what we've said and the explanations I made regarding the implementation of the debt management strategy, you will know that what we were doing, we were increasing our external borrowing and also using some of that external borrowing to repay domestic debt. We want to achieve a ratio of 60-40. We want to bring down debt service costs. We want to free up space in the domestic market for other borrowers. So that $3 billion US dollars was available for repaying domestic debt. So in December, we actually repaid 198 billion of treasury bills. And between January and June, we repaid over 600 billion.
And to some market news now, the Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board has indicated interest in facilitating the listing of indigenous oil and gas companies on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. The Executive Secretary, Mr. Simbi Wabote, in an interview with Channels Television, also after the closing gong on Tuesday, explains that the NSE corporate governance standard portends huge benefits for local oil and gas firms.
Our mission to the stock exchange is to look for areas of collaboration in future. We regulate the oil and gas sector, both upstream, downstream, and midstream. It is our desire and hope that most upstream sector of the oil and gas industry will be part of the stock exchange. Currently, I think it's only Steplat that is listed, both in the Nigerian Stock Exchange as well as the London Stock Exchange, and that brings a lot of visibility to the exchange. So it's our desire as the regulator in local content space to see how we can work and nurture some of the Nigerian upstream and midstream players to be part of the stock exchange. So there's room for collaboration. That's why we're here.
So I know that operators and regulators from the oil and gas industry gathered in Lagos last week to talk about alternative financing for the national gas policy as well as the investments needed in the crude oil sector. Is the visit to the stock exchange today related to that?
I think in the first place, that's the responsibility of NNPC, since they, if you like, are partners to most of the oil and gas companies. So they work with them to source for finance to develop the untapped hydrocarbon resources. And as NCDMB, we also see how we help the Nigerian companies that are in the oil and gas sector with the funding that we provide working with Bank of Industry in order to get them to grow faster and be prominent players in the oil and gas sector. Decision to list in the stock exchange is predominantly theirs. Once the enabling environment is there and all the issues associated with being a company listed in the exchange are met by these companies. There is a process which I believe that most of the companies will benefit at the end of the day through those processes. For instance, the corporate governance requirement to be listed on the exchange, I think it's wonderful, and it has helped a lot of companies to be transparent, and their activities are visible for everybody to see. So I think our visit here is to learn again about the exchange. We've not been here before as an organization. It's an opportunity for us and see how we can synergize and collaborate to support Nigerian companies to be part of the exchange.
Any latest on the Nigeria Content Fund?
Oh, yes. I mean, the latest, you know, we've already made funds available with the Bank of Industry. We are there. We have almost about 50 applicants that are being processed by the Bank of Industry, and I believe very soon we'll probably exhaust that fund, or we'll look for other strategies with which to make the fund available for Nigerian businesses.
And for Tuesday's market review, Temple Ashaju has the details. And of course, we're Bosun Omofaye also in the studio. Good morning, Temple, and good morning, Bosun. Anyway, what soundbite are you getting from the marketplace regarding the July inflation released today by the National Bureau of Statistics, Temple?
Chibuze, good morning. Thank you for joining us here live at the Nigerian Stock Exchange. I've got Bosun Omofaye, our editor, here with me as well.
I'm hanging in here with Temple. A very big day, as you said, Chibuze, about the inflation. Very interesting, and I'm sure we'll have a very interesting conversations with some of our guests on the show. Over there at the headquarters studios and here at the Stock Exchange within the hour. I want everyone to stand by. It's a big day when you have inflation. With some of the numbers I found particularly interesting the last month.
So let's now tell you about the market reaction to that right now. Of course, you know, market opens at 9:30. Brokers are just gathering at the trading floor right now. And we understand the inflation has continued to decelerate. It came in at 11.14% all the way from 11.23% as we had it in June. And all the metrics are basically positive for the investors, traders, and everyone generally participating in the market. For the very first time in a while, we're seeing a decline in food inflation. We're seeing it dropping from to 12.85%, all the way from 12.98%. This is seriously good for investors, especially the domestic investors who are now taking advantage or taking position in the Nigerian stock market and other securities that you have tradable in the capital market, because we know generally that offshore investors are currently making exits. So this is good news for the market, as it were. Chimazi.
Okay, Temple, take us through yesterday's trading activities.
Okay, so let's begin with the NASD OTC, which represents the unquoted securities tradable on that platform. Compared to what we saw on Tuesday, Wednesday saw a bit of decline by 0.64%. Of course, that's some level of profit taking on a couple of securities there, but mainly Firstland Wamco Campina, which had 8% gain in the preceding session. So that's the reason why we had that negative sentiment on the NASD OTC, with just a volume of 11,900 units of securities traded there at the value of 2.53 billion naira. And when we move, if we move to the equities market, all share index was down as well by 0.35%, bringing down the equity capitalization. And that's as a result of sell-offs that we've continued to see on the part of the offshore investors who are gradually making exit as a result of the political tensions we have around and the global trade wars we are seeing in the emerging and, of course, advanced markets. Generally, sectorally rather, we saw the banking sector dropping by 1.06%. And that decline came in as a result of the sell-off on Guaranty Trust Bank. Now, Guaranty Trust Bank fell as a result of profit-taking and of sell-offs as well. Now, in the news this morning, we're aware of the fact that the bank is considering $700 to $800 million conversion of some of its foreign placements with foreign banks now into what you call loans, because if you look at the earnings that was released for the first 6 months of 2018, the loan for that bank dropped by 11%. So now that it is converting some of these foreign placements, deposits basically into loans, it is basically going to help impact its profits and show up the kind of expectations that investors are having on that market or from that company. But in terms of activity level, generally for the Nigerian Stock Exchange, it rose yesterday by 3% and total value dropped by 27% in the markets. The insurance sector was down the most by 2.19% on account of some kind of correction taking place in that sector. We had mutual benefits really attracting investor sentiment in the market. Still with the equities market, let's move on down to the energy market and give you some updates where corn oil, which is number one on our radar, remained unchanged at 24 naira 30 kobo, but with just 12,249 volume of shares traded or exchanged on that. In terms of Seplat, that a lot of investors are watching and waiting to see how the kind of MOU that was signed with the NNPC days ago, will impact that company. It was unchanged in terms of percentage. It remains at 650 naira per share, but we had just 317 units of shares traded on that company. And that we know that Seplat is currently trading below its year high of 785 naira, albeit being up by 3.8% year to date. But we expect that things will begin to change as things go. Eternal oil in recent time has been, attracting investor sentiment. But yesterday, we saw a turnaround by 9.72%, a negative of 9.72%, with 5.76 million units of shares sold off by investors there at that market. It was when the market opened this time yesterday, it was actually up 7 naira plus, but yesterday it ended up closing at 6 naira 50 kobo. That's what it means for investors when they have invested and then you see the price is going up, and it's now time for you to maybe shed the weight on it, basically. So let's go to the fixed income markets, where Treasury bills witnessed some buy pressure. On that side of the market, we saw serious buy pressure on a couple of securities there at the secondary market. Average yields declined by 0.03% to 12.16%. We saw this decline across the 1 month, 3 months, and of course 12-month tenors. But conversely, we saw the 6-month paper tenors as well as the 9 months gaining traction by 0.12% for the 6 months, and of course 0.08% advancement now in terms of yields here, because there was low sentiment on these securities that you have. If you look at the FMDQ OTC trades yesterday, we saw a total number of 446 deals generally, with a total value of 121.6 billion naira. But remember, Chimeze, that today the central bank will be conducting a primary market auction, and will be expecting a 33.38 billion naira worth of maturities today as well. So some liquidity and mop ups a bit in the markets today. 3.3 billion naira worth of primary market auction today for the 91-day paper, while you should also expect the 20
billion naira for 182-day and 10 billion naira for the 364 papers. Of course, there will also be a bond auction today, and yesterday bonds were bearish, but we are expecting the bonds, primary markets bond auction today to change the game for a lot of investors. Chimezie.
Thank you very much for your time, Temple. We'll keep an eye on those auctions today. We'll take a break, and when we return, we'll talk more on the inflation numbers with the first word from Bispa Kiruani. Just stay with us.